Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in for another episode. And today we're going to talk about what I consider to be the single best accent color that you can use that will trigger aggressive strikes from fish. Does not matter what species of game fish you're after, there is something about the color Chartreuse that will just generate them into feeding. Now, there's a lot of people that will sit here and say, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense because the color Chartreuse quickly turns to what would appear to be white underwater. But the reality is, if the fish are seeing it as white, it still does a very good job at mimicking game fish or bait fish. And from that standpoint, it still would trigger fish into biting. Now, personally, I think there's something to do with that color that actually generates a feeding reaction out of them. But over the years, for me, I have never found a single color to make as big a difference as Chartreuse. Now, that's not always necessarily throwing a solid bodied bait color that is all Chartreuse like this. It could just be simply dipping the tail of, say, a shaky head in a little bit of Chartreuse dye. But there is something to be said that it is a great triggering mechanism to get a bass to feed. I personally think a lot of it has to do with bluegill. A lot of times the tail fins of bluegills will have a little bit of a chartreusey, kind of turquoisey, iridescent look to it. And I think that provides the bass something to key in on in terms of attacking that bluegill. And I think Chartreuse does a really good job at doing that. But for me, I really like to have Chartreuse, at least a little bit of Chartreuse on the majority of baits that I do throw. So I wanted to go over a handful of my just favorite baits that have Chartreuse in them, because these are ones that around the country, regardless of whether it's smallmouth, largemouth, spotted bass, I have a ton of luck on these baits. And that's not just me. I can assure you there are a lot of other professional level anglers that carry all these baits in their tackle boxes and throw them on a regular basis. So let's dive right into it. The first one that I showed you right here, this is the caffeine shad. So this is a Strike King bait. This is their Siren color. That's what they call it. It's just a solid Chartreuse, extremely bright colored Chartreuse. Some of you may recall this bait really gaining a lot of traction. I'm going to say 3-4 years ago. There were a bunch of guys fishing it on the St. Lawrence River, catching big smallmouth on it. The reality is this bait also works wonders down on your spotted bass lakes like Lake Lanier. It can be actually a very difficult color to find. In fact, all of these can be difficult to find at times because they are some of the most popular colors, which again, to me, goes back to the Chartreuse. So the Siren color in the caffeine shad is an absolute dynamite bait. Whether you're rigging it in traditional fluke style manners, whether you're rigging it, say, on a hover rig, the point here is this guy will generate some extremely aggressive strikes. Another one you hear me talk about a lot on the channel is this guy. So this is the Berkeley Stunna in the Shad Filla color. The entire belly is a bright Chartreuse. To me, this is the absolute best color of jerkbaits. You know, this is the Shad Fillet, is just one that you've got your translucent sides, a little bit of herringbone silver that gives it like kind of a scale pattern. You've got the natural kind of iridescent purple blue back, but the Chartreuse is really the triggering mechanism that generates those strikes. And I've caught a pile of good fish on these for the last several years. Just my ultimate jerkbait color, but a lot of it has to do with that belly being totally Chartreuse. So if you haven't thrown that color, you definitely want to do it. And I'll put links to each of these in the video description for you to take you to Tackle Warehouse. In case you want to support the channel and you're looking to purchase some of these, that would be a good way to go about doing it. And then I want to know feedback from you too in the comment section. Do you catch them on these colors? I would love to hear from you as well. So this is one that I've done really well on, and this goes back to fellow Bridgeford Pro. So this is the 3.3 size of the Kitech Swing Impact Fat. The actual color name is just Chartreuse Shad. So you can see it's got a bright Chartreuse on the back, kind of fades to a little bit of a translucent Chartreuse, little silver flake in it. dynamite color. This goes back to me, one of the years I was fishing the US Open, so probably back like 2015. There were a pile of West Coast guys that were line through rigging their Kitex, and that was the color that they're throwing. And it was an eye-opening experience because I was like, well, I mean, I love Chartreuse. I have never, actually at the time, I believe they were bringing that color over from Japan. I don't think you could buy that here. Now it's a pretty, much more prevalent color throughout the United States. But they were pounding fish on Lake Mead with it. And since then, I've taken it and caught fish all over the country. But it was just kind of an eye-opening experience because I hadn't seen that color yet. And being that I love Chartreuse, I saw it, had to get it, ordered some from Japan, brought them over, started catching a bunch of fish on it. So another one, you guys know, if you watch my channel on a regular basis, that's Goldilocks. Goldilocks is a color I've been tying forever. It's Chartreuse, white, and a little bit of gold pearl, or gold tinsel in it. So this is the Core Tackle swim jig. So I've been tying that as my swim jig color for years. I have won more tournaments, caught more bass, and won more money probably on this color than any other bait. My first top 20 cut in an FLW Tour event at Grand Lake, skipping this around docks. I've won so much money here in the Wisconsin on the Mississippi River, the Wisconsin River, the Wolf River. I've had I finished 10th, I think, in a Bass Open on Lewis Smith fishing this guy for spotted bass. There's something to be said for a Chartreuse in white colored, whether it's your swim jig, a chatterbait, your spinner baits, a skirted bait in that color will catch you fish around the country. Absolutely. And then last but not least, I love Chartreuse crankbaits. So like the root beer craw color that Berkley makes, this is a dime 6 crankbait, is an absolute killer bait, but it's primarily Chartreuse. It's a very bright bait coming through the water column. And anytime I'm fishing water that's a little off colored, has a little bit of color to it, a little bit of tannic color, I love Chartreuse. It just really stands out very well in the water. And I've caught a ton of fish on the root beer craw color in all of it. The Money Badger, the Dime 6. I just love it because it's a lot of root beer craws are generally a little bit more root beerish. They're a little bit more kind of that rusty color, but the Berkley one is just a bright Chartreuse, and I love that. But those 5 baits with either all Chartreuse or partial Chartreuse are full-blown staples in my tackle box. And it's not like they just have been for a year. They've been for a long time at this point, and they account for a ton of my fish catches. So if you're not fishing any Chartreuse, I highly recommend, even if you don't like a full Chartreuse bait, try tipping, the tails of your craws in a little Chartreuse, or the tail of a shaky head in a little Chartreuse. Or if you throw a swim bait, and you want to throw a white swim bait, just dab a little bit of Chartreuse on there and see if it makes a difference, because I'm telling you, I really feel like it does at this point. And to me, every bite counts. That's all I'll say. If it generates 1 or 2 extra bites over the course of a day, that can be a big difference in terms of your success on the water. So let me know in the comment section, do you agree that Chartreuse can be a phenomenal color, or am I crazy? Let me know, guys. Thanks for watching. Hit the like button if you enjoyed today's video. Subscribe if you haven't done so already. Stay tuned. We'll have a new video coming out tomorrow.